I'm Tom Gantert, managing editor at the Center Square, which, like Chalkboard News, is owned and operated by the Franklin News Foundation. I'm standing in today for Dan McCallum. Chalkboard is a news website dedicated to issues related to K-12 education. And joining me today is Chalkboard's K-12 editor, Brendan Clary. How are you doing today, Brendan?
I'm doing well, Tom. How about you?
Good. You recently wrote about a parent who said that his son experienced anti-Semitism at his public school in Westport, Connecticut, and the school offered a settlement on the condition that no one could talk about it. Can you tell me a little bit about this, what happened, and why it matters?
Yeah, of course, Tom. So Andrew Goldberg wrote for Newsweek last week that he's the parent of a middle school student at Westport Public Schools. And he wrote an opinion piece that his son had to experience all these different anti-Semitic incidents at schools of students saying anti-Semitic phrases, which I don't really want to repeat here, but I mean, just kind of repeated like a torrent of different things happening to his son at his school. And I mean, they were talking about it with the administrators of the school, and the administrators of the school said, we're handling it, and, created a plan. And essentially, Goldberg said, the plan does not do enough to protect my son. So we are going to try to move him. We have to move him to a private school. And Westport Public Schools said that it would offer a settlement, but part of the conditions of the settlement was that the family, the Goldbergs, would not be able to talk about what happened leading up to the settlement. So any of the facts related to the anti-Semitism that his family experienced, that his son experienced while at school, and how that was handled or anything like that. So instead of taking the money, the Goldberg said, we're not going to do that, and we're not going to be silent about this. So I think more broadly, we've seen a lot of tension since the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas, a terrorist organization designated by the United States. There's been a lot of protests. There's been a lot of different anti-Semitism and different kinds of, hate-related incidents at schools and, more broadly in America and throughout the world, frankly. But specifically in Westport, Connecticut, I mean, this caught the attention of, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, who, posted on X, formerly Twitter, that, this was anti-Semitic harassment, and that children deserve transparency, accountability, and safety in the wake of these incidents. Greenblatt said nothing less. And he described the anti-Semitic harassment as disgusting. And the family, too, the Goldbergs, have said, they couldn't be silent about this, right? That was over and above what maybe a normal settlement agreement would have. And that's something that Goldberg pointed out in the piece in Newsweek, right, is that, it is typical in settlement agreements to say when you don't disclose, the terms of the settlement agreement. But this kind of went farther and, in fact, would have required that his 12-year-old son to not talk about what happened to him and these events in his life.
Was that a major reason why the parents decided to not take the settlement?
Yes. Yeah. And I spoke with Goldberg about this and these events and, why they decided not to go through with the settlement. And he said that he will not be silent on anti-Semitism. He's Jewish, and they have relatives who died in the Holocaust, that the silence is not an option. And he's a journalist, and he described interviewing Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor who wrote the book Night, right? He said that it was not an option to take this money. But yeah, that was the biggest issue. Andrew Goldberg's wife, Leslie Durkash, she also spoke before the school board and said that how the administrators tried to buy her family's silence was reprehensible and immoral. And she said she admitted, students are going to say things, and, adults can't always control what's going to happen, but that school leaders should be accountable to handling these situations in a positive way.
So is the school doing anything to prevent anti-Semitism?
That's a great question. Thomas Scarice, the superintendent of the schools, he said in remarks that he prepared before the school board meeting last week that, the school's doing a whole bunch of stuff. And he said that the school has DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that they're using to try to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. He mentioned that they have resources that they use from the Anti-Defamation League, including a training that he recently participated in. That was criticized by Andrew Goldberg. He said, it's easy to rattle off like these lists of efforts, of acronyms, of phrases and initiatives, but it's really hard to translate that into something actionable. And he said, when I was talking with Andrew Goldberg about this, he said, if you ask a student or a teacher, what do you do about anti-Semitism? They'd probably look at you and say, I don't really know. And I think that's sometimes the difficult part about this is how do you transfer some of these initiatives into more actionable things. And so specifically, I asked the school, what are you doing for the Goldbergs? What are you doing to sort of rectify the situation with them, given that the settlement is not an option? And that was not clear. They did not respond to my request for comment there.
Let me answer this more broadly. What are you seeing regarding anti-Semitism in schools around the country?
I think it is sort of, there's been a lot of politicization around diversity, equity, inclusion efforts recently, given that there's still been, a lot of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic remarks and different kinds of statements. And so that's more broadly, that's what we're seeing is, I think, maybe an inability for some of these initiatives to really help students feel supported and welcome, specifically from Jewish parents who have said, my students don't feel welcome here.
Well, thank you, Brendan, but that's all the time we have. You can keep up with this story, like many of the nation's top education stories, at chalkboardnews.com. For Brendan Clary, I'm Tom Gantert. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.
Are you tired of news that puts politics over people? At the nonprofit Franklin News Foundation, we believe in putting people over politics by delivering nonpartisan news and audio content that serves you, the American taxpayer. With Franklin News Foundation, you can read fact-based, state-focused news for free at thecentersquare.com. You can listen to civil, balanced conversations between policy experts through our podcast network at americastalking.com. Or you can get in-depth news on K-12 education spending, curriculum, and school safety at chalkboardnews.com. It's all free through Franklin, where we put you, the American taxpayer, first in every story, episode, and conversation. And it's only possible through our supporters. Together, we can produce content that puts people over politics and brings Americans the news they deserve. Become a supporter today at franklinnews.org/donate. Once again, that's franklinnews.org/donate.